Just want to say welcome to the conversation. My name is Alyssa Levitt, and I will be the host throughout our monthly workforce webinar series. We want to first thank you for taking time out of your day to be here. We understand that this is a busy time for everyone, so thank you. We're extremely excited to share some great insight and strategies from industry experts throughout the series. Today, we'll be running a live Q&A at the end of the webinar, so if you have any questions, just put them in the Q&A chat and we'll try to get to most of them if time prevails. If you do miss anything, don't worry, we will be sending around an on-demand recording when it is available to us. And then if you see, we have our agenda here. We'll be going through the live Q&A at the end. Today we have two of our very own here. We have Rob Moffett, he is our SVP of Client Solutions, as well as Bradley Pearson, and he is our Managing Director for the Americas region. So without further ado, Bradley, the floor is yours.
All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you all for joining. So this webinar and all of our sort of future webinars in the conversation series are based on one simple observation, that the world of work was fundamentally changing before we faced the global pandemic, and now it is continuing to change at an unprecedented pace. From an environmental perspective, talent supply perspective, and talent demand perspective, the world of work is not what it used to be and is likely forever changed. The way we see it, the talent market is comprised of two primary participants, the companies and workers, each of which plays the part of influencer and influence in the relationship, but they're also impacted by external market pressures, creating a symbiotic relationship between all three. A few months ago, we would have focused this conversation on the scarcity of talent relative to demand. That dynamic has obviously changed, but not in all sectors. In some sectors, demand for talent is increasing rapidly. In order to meet that demand, companies and workers are having to be more flexible and agile than they ever have before. Much of this is being aided by advances in technology. I mean, I can only imagine if millions of people were trying to work from home on their old dial-up. Companies are also having to factor in new and often complex legislation, which ranges from aid packages to new rules about sick leave. Matter of fact, there was an article this morning in the Wall Street Journal citing companies that are leveraging or using the enhanced unemployment benefits in order to provide rationale for laying off more workers. The thought there being, if we lay folks off, they'll be in as good or even potentially a better position by not working. So some of the unintended consequences of some of the legislation, but also just an impactful force on the labor market. So suffice to say, the equation is complex and needs to be managed holistically. So as we look at talent and kind of where what we define as talent, you have a basic broad spectrum from employees all the way through to full outsourcing. And this type of talent is quote unquote bought or acquired by different people within the organization. So as we sort of move from employees to temporary, you're looking more HR, talent acquisition, contractors, services, and outsourcing is how you start to move more into a procurement or purchasing group. And it's important to note that for most of today's conversation, we're primarily focused on the right side of the slide here, from temporary workers to outsourcing, as we focus on more of the contingent workforce. So one of the things that we've said about today's contingent workforce model, it is a bit outdated, much like the payphone or the Kodak camera or any number of examples of things that technology have recently sent the way of the dodo bird. So as we look at the sort of the lack of strategy, innovation means that most programs are operating under, they're failing to deliver the expected or promised results, which means that ultimately the business suffers, and because it doesn't have the talent needed to execute on its business plan. So the next thing I want to do is just sort of set the stage for what we call MSP 1.0. We call this MSP 1.0 because this is kind of what we've seen for the last several years and what we're still continuing to see throughout much of the market today. On the left side of the diagram, you have the work that needs to be done. On the right side of the work, you have the talent, which is typically supplied by staffing agencies. And in the middle, you have the program and the MSP, usually supported by a VMS tool, and sometimes you have a compliance group and or a payroll provider or payroll solution. This program office unfortunately often hides behind a figurative or sometimes literal brick wall, and in this command and control MSP model, you don't allow buyers of the talent, the folks that need the work to be done, to have the conversations with the entities that are tasked with providing the talent to fit an often poorly worded job description or job requisition. And furthermore, you manage the entire program through very strict rules of engagement, rate cards, and cumbersome processes that often don't give you the results that you're looking for.
Thank you, Bradley. What I'm going to do over the next couple of minutes is look at the cause and effect of what we described as the command and control approach to engaging of talent, contingent workers or temporary workers. We're doing this through the means of a couple of real-life situations or quotes that we've had from stakeholders we've engaged with. And the one on the screen here comes from a senior professional who was worked for a financial services organisation involved in managing a large contingent workforce. And his quote was that most MSPs or managed service programs are pointing in the wrong direction. We need them to face outwards and focus on our talent and suppliers. I asked him what he said this to me, and I asked him what he meant by this. He said, a lot of programs or approaches or purchasing focus very much on the internal, so processes, procedures, controls of what's required. And although that delivers on the objectives of the body corporate, what it sometimes does is, going back to Bradley's previous slide, almost puts a barrier, actually does the contrary to what the end users of the service are sometimes looking for. You know, they're looking for the talent to get the work done. So they're looking at speed, talent, and efficiency. And the irony is that the program that's been put in place, or the processes that are put in place, because of the focus, are actually achieving the opposite. And as he says there, what he wants them to do, or a beneficial program, would actually focus on identifying that talent and getting that talent in quicker. One of the parties that they should be working with would be the suppliers. So the quote on the next slide, which comes from suppliers, contrary to some perceptions of the staff market, suppliers do want to do a good job. But in some programs, it doesn't provide them with the opportunity to perform at the best. I mean, the actual objectives of both an organisation engaging temporary workers or contingent workers and the various different channels supplying them, their objectives actually are aligned. What they all want to do is engage with each other to find that talent as quickly as possible. And again, by putting up these barriers or these walls, we're not necessarily allowing these suppliers to perform at their best and deliver on the objectives that the organisation is looking for. If we move on to the next slide, the next slide gives you a bit of the workers' perspective. Bradley.
Yeah, and now we start getting into some of the effects of the complex processes and policies in that sort of command and control. So what we had a client tell us sometimes is, well, one of the struggles they were having acquiring the talent that they needed was contingent workers wanted to work for their competitors because it was easier to do. It was the policies and the processes allowed for a better experience for them. And that's actually one of the things that we find that we don't have enough conversations about is the candidate experience for contingent workers, right? If you're looking at full-time recruitment organizations or programs, they spend a lot of time talking about what is the candidate's life cycle feel like? How are they experiencing the process, and how are things once they're onboarded and working? With contingent workforce programs, you don't see that as much, and where a company's competitors are focusing on the worker experience, they tend to have a much easier time attracting the talent that they need. Similarly, with the complex processes and policies, you'll find that managers will go around the program because they don't get the results that they need, right? Human beings, much like water, tend to gravitate towards the path of least resistance. So when managers are faced with overly complex processes or barriers to just getting the work done, they'll find another way. Particularly when you're working in organizations where you have top talent working for you, they're good at solving problems. They'll figure out how to get around the MSP program. Therefore, what we need to focus on is making sure that we have an operating model that provides the most efficient and effective way for the managers to get to the talent that they need, right? Make the easiest path forward doing it the way that the program was designed.
And following that on, I mean, the outcome of that, anyone on this call who's involved with the engagement or the management of a non-permanent workforce will be very familiar with this quote, that they know a significant proportion of the SOW or statement of work spend is in fact miscategorized staff augmentation. Our CW program has created a monster. And there's many analogies that we use here. If you put, as Bradley said, with water, when you plug one leak, another one often appears, or even worse, large pressure may form behind it. The other one I quite like is the squeezing of the balloon. If you grab a balloon at one end, the air doesn't disappear, it's just moved somewhere else. So here, if you're creating a large command and control structure behind one part of your temporary or non-permanent workforce, in most instances, it will just appear somewhere else. So the irony again is with trying to implement a program, a process, or a procedure that is too command and control focused, the actual outcome is actually less control, because people will find a way around. And so the main example we have here is the SOW. The final quote kind of covers, in our opinion, one of the reasons, and in many of our clients or many of our future clients or the people we're talking to, the reasons that this is happening, and that the current MSP or managed service provider or managed service program, the organization that they have engaged to help them manage their contingent workforce doesn't bring any new strategy or innovation. They are losing ground in the market. Increasingly, as we talk to people, or organizations that are coming to these challenges, what we're finding is that people are applying solutions from 10, almost 15 years ago in some of these instances to a modern day problem. And as Bradley said at the beginning, the world is changing even more and even more quickly, so that those solutions are becoming even more outdated by the day. And interestingly, it varies by country as well. So although the US, for example, is probably the largest and arguably the most mature market, there are other opportunities, solutions that are being used elsewhere in the world that could benefit here, but haven't necessarily had the engagement or the buy-in that we're looking at. Okay, so that's the bad news. Is there some good news? And of course there is. So we have a different vision of the future, or the present, if we're completely honest with ourselves. And this is encapsulated in one brief sentence for us. So our vision for the future is for organizations, for us to support organizations, or for them to do it themselves, to get the best talent at the right price and place, at the right time and place, for a fair price, regardless of worker classification or source. Some of you may just call this obvious, some of you may call it enlightened. We call it talent forward, and that is the approach that we look for. And if I could bring this to life for you a little bit around how we see or how we do deliver this, or how organizations can benefit. Taking you back to the slide of earlier, the MSP or Managed Service Program 1.0, which is what we see in the market, probably in organizations, the contracts we've either transferred to Hays or the organization we're speaking to. We see this model still around in about 70 or 80% of the organizations we speak to. And as I say, it's around a command and control structure. And we see this changing. The first thing is the breakdown of that metaphorical brick wall. We call this supplier enablement. And this is trying to This is enabling your suppliers to perform at the best of their ability, making you their client of choice. I think one of my favourite examples of this at the moment, the number of suppliers we work with a larger manufacturing company. That manufacturing company is heavily involved in the present day in producing some of the medical critical products that hopefully not many of us will need in the future. But that organisation, we've worked with a number of their key suppliers, or we've engaged and enabled a number of their key suppliers, which means in this area now, when there is a significant demand for in-demand talent, they're still the customer of choice, top of the list and priority for our MSP program and the supplier. And they've managed to continue keeping these business critical operations going. The second bit, the bit down the bottom, is direct sourcing. Direct sourcing has a number of different interpretations, but for us, what it is generating, curating, and managing a pool of individuals or service providers who are interested and engaged with working for your organisation. And this has actually been quite common elsewhere in the world for 10 plus years. Large organisations building up alumni pools or people, referral pools for them, or actually people who are directly engaged. And again, offers significant benefit. Again, I'm seeing organisations, and we see organisations now in the US, and previously outside, where this is a large, if not the largest, provider of the talent or resources within the organisation, and comes with significant benefits. These are individuals who tend to be more engaged, because they've said, I want to work for this particular organisation, this organisation excites me. Time to hire tends to be less, because you can go through some of the onboarding and pre-engagement program as well. And the cost as well tends to deliver a saving of about 4 to 7% across your total bill value. Next up was what we call the extended supply chain. Again, going back 10, 15 years, if you wanted a non-permanent job, a contract job, a staffing agency was your primary, if not only, route to the market. But increasingly, there are professional contractors, professional freelancers, and professional consultants. And we all know some of them as well. We've worked with some of them. And some of these individuals don't work with a staffing agency at all. They either work through their own networks. There are freelance marketplaces. There's other service providers. There's their own companies. So to make sure that your organisation is benefiting from 100% or 360 view of the talent, what we advocate is bringing within a single program the service providers, the online marketplaces. Going back to my comment of earlier of the squeezing of the balloon, one way to guarantee that you've got all of the air is to grab both ends of the balloon. And this brings the whole lot. Yes, by enabling, you actually deliver on that control as well. And then the final part of the puzzle plays into the bit we were talking earlier about how should things evolve and why haven't they? What you're looking for is either internally, or with a partner. You're looking for someone or an organisation that can bring that extra subject matter expertise, whether it be advisory at the front end, so consulting with managers around, is this a temporary worker? Is this a fixed price? Should this be outsourced? What is the best way of purchasing or acquiring these skills and talent, considering cost, speed, and experience? And then sitting at the top, we've talked about services not evolving over a period of time. Interestingly, we met a company this week that said they had the same service for about 15 years. What you're looking for is a board or a strategy board, be a combination of internal, external, hired expertise that can actually ensure that you get some continuous improvement and development. So we call this MSP 3.0, and what it does is builds on the framework or the foundations of the command and control. It still beds in that risk and cost management that is still important to your body corporate. But what it does is move towards enabling managers in the organisation to get work done, and therefore delivering the other significant benefits you're looking for. So in summary, as Bradley opened with, the world of work has fundamentally changed, but the question for us and the question for you is, are we ready to meet the challenges, but also to take advantage of those opportunities? I'll hand you back to Alyssa now, who will prepare some questions and answers.
All right, thank you, Robert and Bradley. We do have a few questions that came in. First one, you mentioned that there are different strategies being leveraged elsewhere in the world and not in the U.S. Would you be able to give us an example of those strategies?
Yeah, yes, it's Robert. Direct sourcing would be the one. So I'd say that direct sourcing to us is, it's using the same tools, techniques, and strategies that you use your permanent hiring or talent acquisition, and applying that to build a contingent work. I used to be based over in Europe, and I implemented and set up our first direct sourcing or contingent RPO model in 2005 over in the UK. Obviously 15 years or so ago now. Two organisations, a bank and a pharmaceutical company, contracts we still hold 15 years later, and direct sourcing is the main one. Particularly works for manufacturing and also some highly skilled work as well. Also for total talent management, combining both permanent hiring and temporary hiring. Again, probably a victim of how the market grew over here. In the US, a lot of the companies involved here either did temporary hiring or permanent hiring, with RPO or MSP as we tended to refer to it, whereas a lot more organisations based in Europe looked at, a lot more had both, changing in the US now, but therefore the number of services or contracts that actually incorporate both of them in Europe and elsewhere is probably higher as well. So they're the two big picture ones that I would call out. So they're discussions that are being had over here, but there are probably more examples and more development of those two elsewhere in the world, particularly Europe.
Awesome. Along the same vein of direct sourcing, you might have answered a little bit of this, but where do we see it most successful? Where have we done it? And where exactly does it fit into a program?
I could give you another whole 20 minutes on this one, but I will give you the abridged story. The answer isn't one size fits all. And interestingly, particularly a couple of internal functions over in the US have launched it and haven't, when I say internal, companies launched it themselves, and haven't got the benefits that they're expecting or realizing. And these are high-end, high-value brands, so people who would expect people to want to work for them. But there is a segmentation exercise that I would recommend or advocate before you do this. So if you hire 100 people a year, or you have 100 or 1,000 temporary workers or 10,000, I wouldn't advocate deploying the direct sourcing model universally across the entire population. What you do is go through a segmentation exercise, and what you try and do is you identify the ones that are high value to you, so the ones that are either hard to find or deliver the most benefit, and then also potentially focus your resources on the ones where you tend to recruit the same role again, and again. So this might be, for example, R&D, application development, sales roles. What you're going to do there is you're going to build up a continuous talent pool, and you can deliver there, and then you can still work with your key specialist suppliers in delivering the one-offs in the other areas as well. So it's a combination of segmentation based on value to you as an organization, location, and then whether they are roles you repeat whether you recruit one of them or repeatedly as well. And that's where you should focus your resources for direct sourcing, or for the best ROI, at least in the first instance.
Great, thank you. Last question. How does the current pandemic situation affect this model?
Yeah, so I would say that the pandemic itself, I don't think has impacts the model. I think the pandemic has shown us where the model works. In times where some of our clients, their demand has fallen off quite a bit. Others, as Rob mentioned earlier, we have one client, demand in some of their business has really increased. So having a better line of communication with the supply chain and having a better relationship with that supply chain has allowed us to react very quickly to both the increases and the decreases in demand in order to make sure that our clients are able to carry on with whatever business plan they have to get through the pandemic.
Great, thank you. one last one just came in. We do have a little bit of time for it. So how do you keep key suppliers engaged while introducing strategies like direct sourcing?
The actual answer is, so if you introduce direct sourcing will obviously take a degree of the volume. There's no disguising that. That is one of the objectives of it. So there will be, overall, there can be or will be less opportunity for the supply chain. But again, with the segmentation approach, what you're looking for is you are looking for your best suppliers to thrive and continue. And if you do lose some of your lower performing, or let's non-business critical ones that aren't performing the business critical function for your organisation, but you can concentrate with those other ones as well. You can almost go as far as we have had clients, we've worked with customers who've actually reinvested some of the savings from direct sourcing in working with your niche suppliers. So actually those suppliers have benefited from it. So there may be a 4 or 7% saving in category A. Let's reinvest some of that money, still take a proportion of the savings, but let's say to our niche suppliers, we're relying on you or engaging you for these ones, but we're actually offering you an increase in there, and we're offering you better visibility of it and in that area. So yes, there is a right sizing of your supplier population, but your best suppliers who you engage with will continue to thrive and will improve, and your non-business critical suppliers that you may not need as many of those, or there might not be as much business that goes through those in the medium long term. So there's no disguising it. Yes, it is. It is extremely it, but you do need to, and you can keep engaged, and even better engaged some of those key suppliers.
Great, thank you. All right, we'd like to say thank you everybody for joining. That concludes this month's conversation. Be on the lookout for next month's webinar that will be headed your way shortly. And thanks again. And thank you, Robert and Bradley.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you everyone for joining.